All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns, if I can say it today. And it's the last show of 2024. Oh my word. How did we get
Oh,
here, Lisa? How did we get here?
I
How did
don't
we get
know.
here?
I don't know. Hey everyone, happy last episode of the year. Um,
Ah.
I don't know how we got here. I feel like if I spend too much time thinking about it, then I have an existential crisis. So I think we just need to move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on. Don't look back. Don't look back. Yes, that's a biblical story, Lisa. Don't look back. You'll turn into a pillar of salt. Don't do that. Don't do
Okay.
that. Just
All right.
keep
I
keep
keep
right here.
going.
Right here. Exactly. Exactly. But good to be with you all again. We have a word of the week. And Lisa, tell me about these conversations you have with students that are just
hmm
intriguing. I don't have those conversations much anymore. So tell me all about it.
Yeah, so the word of the week is diaspora. And a few years ago now, I had a conversation with a student who was explaining how her family member had migrated to or immigrated to the United States from a South American country. And then at a later point, that family member, along with a lot of other people who were from the same country, went back to that country. And she described that as diaspora. And my feeling was that diaspora doesn't mean going back to your traditional homeland, right? It means when you either by choice are or are involuntarily removed from your traditional homeland, and there are lots of you for which that happens to. And so then that is the diaspora, right? So African American people or African people, I guess, who were forcibly removed from the African continent. And so that was a diaspora, right? And you also do have diaspora from Central and South America. But going back, returning to your original place of origin or the original place of origin for your ancestry, I don't see that as diaspora. And so I looked it up and it's known as return migration. But that's the conversation I had with a student, and it's always been on my mind because
Hmm.
I'd never resolved it until you and I had this conversation about word of the week.
Now that's interesting because the Greek original term that is the foundation of diaspora specifically speaks to spreading out, dispersing, diaspora, dispersing. And so I would have never thought about that as far as returning to the homeland. And I'm glad you gave us a word for it because I really couldn't think of a word as far as yeah, what does it mean when you return back to your homeland? Not quite sure. So that makes complete sense. But yeah, diaspora, I usually think about a group of people that started in one place, ended in many places. Yes, technically you could return, but what does that return mean as far as your identity, your development, a permanent return or a visit return, all of that. So, interesting. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into phase one. And I have to say, as a Marylander, I was super interested and proud of a recent moment that occurred actually on Veterans Day. So this was last month, you all, here in Maryland, where uh, many of us know the name when we hear it of Harriet Tubman and Harriet's impact on the Underground Railroad. And a lot of people actually don't know, Lisa, that Harriet Tubman is a very firm Marylander. So, given that we take claim to lots of African Americans that were pivotal in this country, but what is fascinating is that the Maryland National Guard and our governor, Wes Moore, on Veterans Day, decided that they would posthumously award Harriet Tubman with a one-star general designation. Huge deal. Huge deal. I think it's pretty incredible when, you know, some folks talk about this phrasing, Lisa, and you've probably heard this of, I want to be on the right side of history type of thing, right? And frankly, I know it's an ableist phrase, the phrase hindsight is 2020, but reflecting, we can see our mistakes. Sometimes we can see it in the moment, other times we can't. And so I think it's interesting that Maryland, being overwhelmingly African American, having tons of leadership that is African American, is finally making this designation for her, in such a way that it continues to remind us of not only what she did for many, but also too how it holds up to, um, kind of this understanding of what it is to be a person that is literally fighting for freedom of individuals within a country that was not always deeming those individuals free. Um, she escaped from slavery herself, but then also guiding other people, from Dorchester, Maryland, and all the way up to Philadelphia, and then, of course, up to Canada. So the fact that her descendants attended that commissioning ceremony is just mind blowing, because a lot of times, many of us, including African Americans, think about these stories as only belonging in history books from K through 12. And when you get to see it right in front of your face in the moment, that these are real people with real lives and real impact, it's just profound. So thought this was a cool story to start out with, especially given that I don't think we touched on anything veteran related in November. So it was a good way to honor her.
Yeah, and I think for me, it brings up a lot of stuff around the way in which our history is whitewashed, right? And the degree to which Harriet Tubman's legacy is represented in the history books, and particularly now when there is this move in some states to diminish and in other cases remove discussions of slavery and the ways in which some people featured very heavily in that, white people, right, obviously as enslavers, but also African American heroes, in terms of the ways in which that they orchestrated the escape of many enslaved people, but then also thinking about her contributions in a military way, which makes me think back to last week when we had brought up Pete Hegseth and his on the record quote that he thinks that women should not be in combat, and that we didn't mention this last week, but I think he also has the opinion that any non-white male in the military is a DEI hire. So I just have to chuckle a little bit here, Shaunna, to think about this honor that was belatedly given to Harriet Tubman and her family and descendants. It's like Pete Hegseth's comment to that going to be that she's a DEI hire for the military and, should never have served in the
Exactly.
first place, right? Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
And let's be
yeah.
clear, she wasn't hired because she was never paid. So whatever. I mean, but you're right. We know how, what did someone say? Someone said to me earlier today, the pretzeling of the truth, right? Like, let's
Mm,
just twist it up into something that it wasn't. And you're right. We've seen some of those arguments come up around somebody being a
yeah,
DEI hire. I'm like, get out of here. That's
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
That
and I'm
is a
sure
distortion at the
it is a
least.
distortion. It is a distortion. And the resistance to this honor that was bestowed, right, being, well,
Hmm.
she didn't ever really serve in the military, so that's not appropriate. Like, I can absolutely hear it now, right? Like,
Oh, of course.
this
Of course.
comments, like, kind of absent the context. To your point, she was never
Hmm.
paid, right?
Right, right.
And so I am sure Wes Moore was acutely aware of the
Hmm.
timing of
That's right.
uh this honor
Hmm.
that he bestowed on Veterans Day
Yeah.
2024, not any other
Uh-huh.
time, right? Although, how long has he been in his position?
At least I think he's 4 years, 2 years, 4 years. 2 years. It had to be 2
Two.
years. I moved into my house 2 years ago, and my neighbors across the street had Wes Moore signs up in front of their yard. So 2 years. Yeah.
Okay, so he could have done it last year, I suppose. Yeah.
hmm
But
hmm
I just kind of feel
And he's
like
a
it's
military man himself as well, by the
yeah.
way. He's, yeah.
Okay. It
hmm
feels like a little trolly, and I kind of love it. I mean, like, not to take away from the fact that she deserves it. That's not what I mean. But I also think within
Right.
this kind of political and cultural climate, it's like we're
hmm
taking this really important figure who is a Black woman, and a Black woman was just defeated, right, by someone who doesn't give two shits about historic oppression or the experience of Black Americans. And I'm going to do this. I don't know. I kind of love it for all those things. And I'm just like piling this on, and he didn't have any of these intentions, but I don't know.
Well, the symbolism is not lost on me at all. And we have to remember Governor Moore's own military background. I think he was in the army for, gosh, several years. And of course, we have someone that's coming in very bright, veteran, Rhodes Scholar. I have a feeling that his track of thinking was very similar to yours, Lisa, in that, yeah, this might fly in the face of certain people, and that's okay by me. So Maryland makes no apologies for its blackness. Let's put it that way. In
Mm-hmm.
lots of different
Mm-hmm.
fronts. I mean, think about everything in the state that is either named by someone African American, named for someone African American, or led by someone African American. Lisa knows. I joke all the time when I get back from business or whatever, I am back in the great state of Maryland, where my mayor is Black, my governor is Black, now my senator is Black, and even my airport is Black. So everything is Black
Mm-hmm.
here. And I know I'm being a little facetious with that, but those points are true. And so as we begin to honor, or continue to honor, the history of people that have done much work here in
Mm-hmm.
Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
we can't just step over some of those important stories. I mean, Lisa, one of the things that I remember in many Eagle Man 70.3 races, that all of it is riding across the terrain that Harriet Tubman tread to get to the Choptank River in order to continue further north. All of it. I mean, you pass by the museum, there's mile markers everywhere of what she accomplished there. There's pretty much no way to avoid knowing that history there. And so, yeah, what she did as a scout, a spy, a nurse, all of those different things. And on top of that, ironically, as someone in the military that struggled with their own mental health and what they called at the time visions, uh, seeing certain visions as she traversed the north, headed beyond Philadelphia, major headaches and seizures that she encountered after being struck in the head, like all of that. I mean, that's, in my opinion, a war wound. Anyone else would be treated for such treatment. And so with that, I think it's just most appropriate. And I'm super proud and happy that these stories are not just kept amongst us as Marylanders, but other folks get to enjoy the history of knowing this information, which I think is pretty cool. So a one-star general, that's pretty badass, Lisa. I mean,
It's
pretty
very
badass.
badass. And we know that the US military and state level militaries don't have a lot of those who are
No,
both African American and then also women, right? So
that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
definitely working to fix that little problem, but not if Pete
Mm-hmm.
Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. I feel like we're going to take
Right.
9 steps backwards there, but that is a story for another day. So
There you
how
go.
about
Mm-hmm.
we make the jump into phase 2, and there
Woohoo!
is a connection between phase 1 and
Oh,
phase 2,
oh
right?
yeah,
So
there's a major connection here.
yeah.
So, a couple of holidays ago, Lisa, I was very fortunate to be able to take the boys to see Wicked on Broadway. And I took them in. Now, Kendrick is exempt from this conversation because he fell asleep for like half of the show. Okay, fine. But for my older son who's interested in theater anyway, we it was a wonderful experience for him. We got to go see the backstage and how the production works, the lighting, all of that good stuff. And now that Wicked is a movie, let me tell you, Trey has been looking forward to this for months now. Both of the boys have been reminding me of obviously the pink and the green motifs because those are my sorority colors, y'all. So they keep showing, all the merchandising that's specifically on both pink and green witches and so forth. But bringing this connection here, Cynthia Erivo, my mom just adores this woman. She loves to hear her sing. I mean, she's got some major chops on her. And Cynthia Erivo, let's give y'all the connection here between phase one and phase two. She plays in both the Harriet movie of Harriet Tubman, as well as Elphaba in Wicked, the movie, the Green Witch, if you will. And I think it's an interesting story to think about. And Lisa, we are not movie critics, but at the same time, I think I don't care too much about spoilers, but I don't think this is a spoiler at all in that there's so much context that swirls around the complexity of Cynthia Erivo, her role, and how she shows up here in Wicked the movie. I think it's interesting. And frankly, as much as I loved Wicked on Broadway, before Trey said something to me about wanting to go see it, I actually wasn't interested in going to see the movie. And part of my reason for that was I have a long memory. I have a long, petty, receipt keeping memory, Lisa. And let me tell you, I didn't forget when there were folks that called into question whether Cynthia Erivo should be cast as Harriet Tubman because we're thinking about a Black British actress playing an African American figure, right? And I was like, not ideal, but I don't want to hate on another Black woman from the diaspora that is in a role that are roles that are hard to get, right? I mean, even think about that's another layer to all this is like, can we get roles that are not enslaved, that are not someone's mammy, that are not in servitude to somebody? That's a whole nother conversation. But hey, if you're going to do it right, obviously. And so after the critiques started to emerge about Cynthia Erivo being cast as a British Black woman in this role, the nastiness of her tweets, her social media really flying back in the face of African Americans, African American women around. Well, I guess I'm not African American enough for this role. Some of the phrasing was using quote unquote ghetto language, which I read as in this is a thought that quote unquote ghetto language is synonymous with African American English vernacular. Like there were just some things I was like, hold up, girl, wait a minute, wait a minute. I was a bit pacified with you going ahead and taking the role because you did a great job in Harriet. But once you started talking shit about me and this country, because I took it very personally at the time, then I'm like, now that's not okay. And so there's a lot swirling around this. I would say, Lisa, that this is very similar to folks that are not part of the communities taking certain roles, like when we talked about Bayard Rustin's role and so forth in a previous episode. Yeah, I would prefer an African American woman to take the role, but yet at the same time, whoever takes the role don't talk shit about the community that still supported you as you took a role that we weren't quite convinced that you should take to begin with. So I'll stop there, Lisa. I know this kind of went off on a tangent from Wicked, but I do want to honor the craft. I do want to honor that Cynthia worked really hard to make Wicked believable and some of the, the acrobatic feats that she needed to do without a body double, she did. Without a stunt double, she did. I want to honor that's a lot of hard work. Yet at the same time, don't talk shit to African Americans. I mean, enough already. We got enough
Mm-hmm.
other groups talking shit to us that we don't need to feel it and hear it from those that are across the diaspora. No, thank you.
So, so originally, her
Yeah.
her casting in the Harriet Tubman role was critiqued publicly. And
Yes.
then okay, and then she responded in a way that kind of threw gas on the situation.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So, I mean, I mean, she obviously was defensive, right? And so she
Mm-hmm.
responded in a way that
Mm-hmm.
belied that defensiveness. So that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really great.
Mm-hmm.
And drawing on some pretty white stereotypes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so you were fine with her being cast in the role, but once she then, or she probably understood to be defended herself from those critiques,
Yeah,
kind of
there you
went
go.
below the belt, right? And that changed it
Mm-hmm.
for you. So
Yeah.
so knowing that, how do you feel about her performance in Wicked? How do you feel about her being put in that role, being cast in that role, given your love of theater production?
Well, I still think talent versus personal values are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this with a number of infamous folks that we felt were highly talented, but their ethics and values are interesting, to say the least.
Right,
And so,
right.
I mean, we can go all the way to the extreme of Cosby if we want to go there. That's not what we're talking about today, but we could go to the extreme of talent versus ethics and values.
Right.
She is a phenomenal, and I think few, if not one in a generation talent. But again, I don't care how much talent you have, you can't talk shit about groups that, especially groups that support you. And it doesn't exempt you from, frankly, being a good person. Because we've seen this happen before. We've seen it happen with, especially with white men who were, some of which were phenomenal actors and entertainers. But then when we got under the surface of what was really going on, they were just full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
That changed for us how we perceived their art.
Yeah.
So, for example, I watched, this was one of my binges during the holidays a while ago where I think it was the Kevin Spacey documentary that was talking about him specifically and all the harassment and other things that he was doing on set with people. I'm thinking, yeah, incredible talent, but now I can't see the art in the same way because I know that
Mm-hmm.
you're a shitty ass person.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, as much as I would love for those to be bifurcated, for me, it's hard to make that so. I'm trying. It's hard to make that so with her.
Yeah. I mean, you just said something about not being rude or nasty or cruel to people that support you. But what I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering is if she didn't feel supported, what from her perspective was that I'm a Black woman playing this phenomenal um, woman in history, and I thought I would be supported in that by Black women, but they're
Mm-hmm.
attacking my legitimacy in this role.
Yes, 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 yes.
So I don't
Yeah.
know what was in her head or in her heart, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, she handled the critique badly. That's probably an understatement. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand, like, what would, like, so was she feeling betrayed and then that led her to lash out? You know what I
That's
mean?
a good
Like,
question. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if it was like even some of the tweets, and there were a lot of them, Lisa. I can't even pick
okay,
on just one.
yeah.
But out of the tweets that I saw, it was kind of like, you're not even qualified to critique me as an artist
Oh, okay.
type feel to it. And I'm like,
Like,
mm,
I'm better than you. Was it that? Did it have that
it was,
vibe?
yeah, it kind of had that vibe of you're not qualified to critique whether I should be in this role or not. So just shut up and enjoy the movie.
Mm,
That's what it felt like to me. And I'm thinking to myself, even when someone's good, that doesn't make them great, right? Like I've seen actors that were good in roles, especially biopic type roles, that were good in roles, but I'm like, not great. So I forget what movie it was I saw. Oh no, it was Fight Night. That was a short series on Paramount that was Kevin Hart, and they were telling this story around a Muhammad Ali fight. The guy that played Muhammad Ali in that particular short series, I didn't think he was the greatest, but that's because I've probably measured him in my brain against Will Smith. Like,
mm,
nah, you're not going to, you're just not going to measure. You can do the best, you can do the performance of your whole life and still not be Will Smith in the role of Muhammad Ali. So I want to give him credit, but yet, and so I kind of feel similarly with this Harriet conversation is that you could have given the performance of your life, but we all know based on the casting that you are not African American, which then
mm,
brings up some hard feelings around should should we continue to buy into the monolith of blackness,
right,
or should we critique it a bit more heavily? Because if we critique it more heavily, we don't want to create infighting along with that
right,
either.
right.
So that's why the everybody chill. It's fine. We're grateful that we have a Black person that's portraying a major Black figure in history in a film until you started talking shit. Now you're talking shit. Now we gotta have a conversation that begins the infighting that didn't need to be there.
So even if she's coming from a place of really hurt feelings, that still doesn't justify the apparently long list of tweets that she
Well, I mean,
articulated.
and I don't know that's why I want to do a little more digging around in the crates here around
Mm-hmm.
this particular topic because I don't know that I don't know that there was ever an acknowledgement from Cynthia that this is a huge, gargantuan African American woman
Okay.
figure.
Yeah.
I feel honored to play in the role.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did it justice and did a great job. And I want to honor the other African American women who look up to this role that I'm playing a
Yeah.
very small part in versus African Americans, African American women. Y'all shut up and just enjoy the damn movie. Like
Yeah.
the tone was off. Like
Yeah.
I didn't feel any humility in playing a role that's not 100% yours.
Mm-hmm.
But then who gets to say what's yours? Because she could be saying, yeah, it is mine too, because I'm within
Yeah.
the diaspora. She could disagree with me on that point.
Yeah, it is interesting because I do think, I mean, granted, I'm not African American, but being British, so
Mm-hmm.
I have a double layer of distance from Harriet Tubman
Mm-hmm.
or from the experience, the African American experience, right? Both in
Mm-hmm.
race and in
Mm-hmm.
nationality. And so
Mm-hmm.
while British people may learn about Harriet Tubman, I don't think that what you just said there about her being huge and gargantuan, this enormous figure that was so instrumental, right, in forwarding freedom for enslaved people, I think there is always going to be a distance where
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that knowledge and an emotional knowledge is not going to be felt by someone even if they identify as black brought up in the United Kingdom because
Oh.
it's not the same, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be this distance. I don't say that to justify it
Yeah,
because
yeah.
but even if she read up on her, right? Even if she was very educated about Harriet Tubman, I think there is an emotional distance that cannot be bridged
Mm.
because she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
live here and doesn't have a generation of family members behind her, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who experienced enslavement in the United States. I mean, actually, I don't know that, right? I
Mm.
don't know her lineage. Maybe she does have that.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
is just now in Britain. So I don't know. So it's just something I am toying with. Like, I just wonder, there's just a degree of distance that I don't know can be bridged because that emotional connection just will never be the same. Does that make
Mm-mm, mm.
sense?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And it reminds me it reminds me very much of the conversations that I've had with my African students who their parents and their parents' parents never experienced the institution of slavery, but they're lumped
Okay.
into those of us who
Right.
have,
Yeah.
or they never experienced the stain of Jim Crow. And so it's hard for them to understand. And in fact, there's a critique. That's where the infighting begins with, well, why are you
Hmm.
complaining about, sitting at the back of the bus? Because bitch, I'm talking about Rosa Parks. You wouldn't know that, right? And
Right.
that's where the frustration comes
Yep.
from
Yep.
the challenge of African Americans being misunderstood by so many groups, including across the diaspora, that haven't experienced the institution of slavery.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
That to your great point, the distance of emotion that they haven't had to cross, like, they're thinking, well, what's the big deal about, about having to go to the water fountain? Because damn it, we remember when there were two water fountains and one
Hmm.
was white and one was black, and the black one had warm water, didn't even have cool, fresh water. Those types of things
Yeah.
that are I suggest are written into our DNA as descendants of enslaved folks here. That
Hmm.
it feels like too huge of an expectation for certain groups to understand or ever get, and so it's hard to play that role. Um,
Yes. Yes.
even as I still feel like she did a phenomenal job with Harriet, I'm thinking again in my brain, how much more would an African American woman
Yes.
that's a descendant of the institution of slavery taken it to yet another level, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No
Yeah.
shade, but the greatness,
Hmm.
the excellence level could have even been higher. So that's where I sit with that. But
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm
yeah,
landing actually after this discussion is exactly to this last part of what we've been talking about. That's the
yes,
reason why a British
yes,
person should not have been cast in this role, right?
yeah,
Even as
yeah,
she did a great job. I think that that's the piece that's missing.
yeah.
And is it fair to have that
Mm-hmm.
expectation of her and others? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
yet, right? But I still think
Mm-hmm.
that emotional divide can't be bridged. Like
Yes.
empathetically can be understood, but just not in the same deeply felt in your bones, right? Understood?
Exactly. I think the interpret, and I know we got to move on. The interpretation, since I've been bringing up Will Smith this whole time, the interpretation of Cynthia's Harriet was wonderful, but to me, less authentic than, for example, Will Smith's interpretation of emancipation.
Oh yeah.
See what I'm
That was
saying? Like, and and
that was
and
a
forgive
jarring
me,
movie. Yeah.
yeah, and forgive me for the gender dynamic there, but that's the closest analogy I can think of at the moment in regards to someone being from the diaspora, but specifically African American, portraying African American enslaved experiences.
Yeah.
Those are different concepts to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this is a really
Oh,
interesting
anyway.
discussion, but yes, we have extended. You got an extended phase two there. I think we
Yes,
stumbled across
yes.
some things in that discussion. So let's move into phase three then and wrap it up here. And so
Yes, yes.
we sometimes have talked about the futility of setting New Year's resolutions, right? About these
Yeah.
things that you're going to do and where that tradition came from and how it can ultimately make us feel worse if we don't achieve them, and what is the point in many ways. And so I think there's a couple of things we want to wrap up with here in phase three is maybe it's not about things that you do in 2025. Maybe it's about things that you choose not to do or not to engage in, and how that might contribute to the maintenance of your emotional health and well-being, as we move through and beyond January 20th. So I'm wondering, Shaunna, what your perspectives are on if we twist that and say, what are some things that we might choose to disengage from as part of this kind of new year
Hmm.
perspective?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think uh, the movement has already started, and I think I'm part of that movement accidentally, yet now on purpose. That a lot of you all saw, whether it was artwork or other things that spoke to African American women divesting from the emotional labor of thinking communally, collaboratively, systemically for this country, yeah, I ain't doing that shit no more. And what I mean by that is not that I don't even think it's possible to stop caring or to even stop understanding those systems, because I think that's just a superpower in and of itself that you just can't turn off. If you have it, I think it's going to stay on naturally. The stop doing part is remembering that no, you don't have to be America's lifeguard. You don't have to be America's first responder. You don't have to be America's EMS on every single thing that we see go wrong. And to me, that translates to allowing lots of things, whether it's nationally, regionally, state, personally, simply doing this, meaning allowing for the accountability to fall where it may, right? And I'm now okay with that. And in previous years, I had not been okay with that. And I realized as a woman, as a Black woman, as a mom, as lots of different things, I remember many times thinking or saying, if I don't do it, then it won't get done. And that ended up empowering me, or probably over empowering me, and disempowering other folks that needed to step up. And I've decided I am no longer disempowering other people that need to think harder, need to think smarter, need to take action on things that it was okay to allow, right? So it's kind of like what we talked about before with the invisible labor piece, especially in heterosexual relationships, where the man in the relationship, yeah, he could, I don't know, he could clean house, but he knows she's going to do it, so he's not going to initiate because I'm just going to, because I know she's going to do it anyway. And then she's frustrated because she's thinking, well, he knows how to clean. Why doesn't he do it? Because he knows you're going to do it. And so what would happen? I think you and I saw that video once where this woman kind of divested from the household responsibilities for a couple of days just for her partner to understand how much work she did. That's where I'm at with it. I'm stopping the lifeguarding on things and letting the accountability fall where it is. I'm stopping responding to things so quickly. So, just because somebody sends you an email or a message right now, that doesn't mean you need to respond instantly and stop your day. Um, I'm not going to rearrange what makes me happy for other people that just don't frankly deserve it, in my opinion. Just not doing those things anymore. Yeah, I'm not doing those things. And I think that kind of goes into what a lot of therapists and psychologists use as that wheel of rest, where there's lots of different types of rest. I think it's like 6 or 7 different types of rest, whether it's artistic rest or social rest or whatever it is. All of them. I want all of the whole wheel. That's what I'm doing. The whole wheel. Um, Still love to do my work, still love to engage with people, but the moment that I see that it drains me too much, I'm not doing it. And so there's a couple of Christian scriptures that speak to this aspect of uh, my cup runneth over. Part of that is a visual dynamic of I have to fill my cup of energy, or I have to fill my cup of empathy or whatever positive emotion, and everybody else gets the overflow of that, the extra of that, right? Most Black women don't function that way. Most Black women are, I give to everyone first, and I get the leftovers. And so it's this whole reframe of not going to give myself leftovers anymore. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I like that last imagery, like kind of shifting that dynamic, but requires you to disengage from the dynamic, right? To not do
Yes.
something.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
and I'm thinking about, I don't know if we've talked about it on the pod, but there is research around the way in which quote unquote self-care has become an industry. And so there are people who are profiting off of our collective need to de-stress or do things for ourselves, right? And this, the groups that tend to be the folks that need the most self-care are the groups who are most marginalized in society, right? And so then these industries, capitalism, are profiting off of that ongoing pain. And so when I think about divesting or not doing something, what comes to mind based on what you were sharing, Shaunna, is all those simple remedies, like buy this facial, buy a manicure or pedicure, pay for this massage, pay for this. I mean, they're just examples, but you get my drift, right? Like the ways in which we are kind of pulled into this capitalistic endeavor to pay for something to create self-care for ourselves, but we don't work in environments where that space is given or where we are given an opportunity to actually do something meaningful. So I think one of the things of the not doing is to maybe not give money to those endeavors, right? I'm actually not going to pay into that system where I have this superficial something, but
Yes.
then my, like my environment, my work environment, my friend environment, my political environment, whatever, it doesn't fix the fundamental problems there. And so then I just keep, jumping from rock to rock, keeping my head
Yes.
above water rather than doing anything meaningful. And the meaningful thing, I think, is to say I'm not gonna fall into that trap where I'm just kind of feeding this capitalist engine that's making money off of the fact that these structures don't work for me.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Well, and we realize again that the efforts and energy is around the systems that unfortunately victimize individuals with this, because we know the systems that make people tired. We know the systems that overrun parents. We know the systems that overrun women. And, I'm sorry, but a new loofah and some shower gel ain't gonna cut it for an
Right.
entire
Right.
system of childcare and, education and everything else. That's not gonna cut it. And so I appreciate the divesting from the simple, short, I don't even want to call them fixes because they don't fix anything. They
No.
divert our attention away, but they don't
Yeah.
fix
Yeah.
anything. Um, Diversions that just don't work. So yeah, I'm in this process of contracting. I'm
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
contracting from what has been, what could be, into a place where I'm like, not going to do that anymore. No, not going to do this,
Yeah.
not going to do that. Still going to vote, still going to, mind my own business, still going to take care of my family to the best of my ability based on the very same values. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that I'm, turning backflips down the street to overextend myself to other families and systems that don't feel similarly about systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I think
can't
that's important.
compensate for empathy.
Right.
You can't
No.
compensate for other people's empathy. And I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, doing the work that you do, you are putting yourself in environments where you are coming face to face with people that have a lack of empathy or don't understand it. So it makes sense to me why outside of that, like creating
Yeah.
that professional boundary, this is what I do for a job, right?
Boundary.
But
Yes.
like
Yes. Yes.
outside of that, I'm not going to continue to let that spill over into my personal life and continue to do that
Mm-hmm.
same thing
Yeah. Yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? I'm going to actually
Mm-hmm.
contract, as you said. I really like the way that you framed
Yeah,
that.
yeah, just not going to do it. Like, for example, the the boys media center at one of their schools reached out and said, we know that you do this type of work. Could you provide us some suggestions for age appropriate books on social justice, diversity, XYZ? Yeah, I could. Am I going to do it? No.
Right. Right.
And that's not money grubbing, and that's not selfish, and that's not capitalistic. It's I don't have the emotional capacity to think that far
Right.
when I do it every day for a living. I know that makes me more equipped to do it than the average person, but do I have it? I'm more equipped to do it, but I'm least powered to do it. The energy isn't there, and I'm okay with that.
Well, and that's also to your earlier point, right? Where you doing the thing lets other people off the hook. So these folks who
Hmm.
outreach to you, there is the internet, right? And you could research
And other
that and
librarians
yeah,
that do
and
this
you
work for a living.
exactly. So you don't just go to one, you're going to have to look and see, read reviews and get an understanding of who does
That's
this.
it.
And that's work that you do, right? Where it's just easier to ask you. And that
That's right.
may or may not have had ill intent, right? Maybe the person wasn't lazy. They thought they were being, I don't know.
Hmm.
But it's,
Hmm.
but you saying no is then creating, okay, I need to do this myself, which is the stepping up piece that folks wouldn't otherwise do if Shaunna kind of swooped in and took it all, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm just not willing to do that on these large systemic bases. I'm not willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just not. I don't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
So I think that's where we can leave it and leave you,
Hmm.
dear listener, with thinking about what is it that you could stop doing, right? As a
Yes.
means to shift your trajectory in 2025. What might that look like? How might you
Hmm.
divest or contract and create habits that are in the opposite direction to doing more things, right? Because that's
Absolutely.
part of the trap is we keep adding, adding, adding. And
Hmm.
at this point, it should be some subtraction, I think.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. Subtract.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
All right. Well, look, Lisa, we are off the mic for about 2 weeks, right? And then we come back. The first episode of 2025 will be on January 7th, our usual
Mhm.
Tuesday drop. So Lisa and I are gonna me. We're gonna let the vocal cords cool off for a little bit because we have been consistent throughout the year. But let me tell you where you can find us because I know some of you all have jumped on board during this past year or so, and you
Mhm.
haven't heard
Mhm.
some of the archives. So go to the
Right.
website,
Yep.
listen to the archives. So what we'd ask you to do is, of course, follow us on YouTube, Unfazed Unedited, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Find us on Instagram at Unfazed Pod, LinkedIn on Unfazed Pod, or email us your questions. Maybe you have a word of the week that you want explained by us. You can email that at info@unfazedpodcast.com. And of course, all of those archives are at unfazedpodcast.com, old and new shows. So like, subscribe, leave a review, share us with your friends, your coworkers, and anyone else in this phase of your life. So Lisa, until next year. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Until next year, have a great end of 2024, everyone.
Woohoo.